Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
Hi, Jodie. Welcome to Savvy Broadcasting, Life Unscripted for our Life After COVID special. I'm so grateful to have you here today. You are a British media executive who's also written a very fascinating book, Los Angeles Reinvented. I've always wanted to visit Los Angeles. I've gotten a little closer to the west side of the country, moving to Texas recently. But you're going to share how LA is exploding, even amongst COVID going on right now. It is still an amazing economy, one of the ones to reckon with around the country. But before we go to sharing all that, share with our audience a little bit about your backstory and what brought you to write your book.
Yeah, absolutely. LA, I just find such a fascinating place. And to be honest, when the opportunity came to move here 5 years ago, LA just wouldn't have been on my top 20 list of cities to move to. I've lived in Paris for 5 years. I've lived in Madrid. I worked for the New York Times for almost 5 years. So I spent a lot of time in New York. I'm from London. So I consider myself fairly international. And when this opportunity came up, I thought, oh, LA, well, can't I go to New York? Can't I go to San Francisco? Because I know both of those places and I could plug in both professionally and personally. Yeah. But it turns out that LA was actually completely the right place to come. So I moved here in 2015 and I realized how much was here, but also how different Los Angeles is. So as I started exploring a little bit, really to understand, do I actually want to live here or not? I actually called one of my best friends and she came to LA a lot on business. So I said, look, this has come up. I'd actually just moved back to London. I was getting settled. I was really enjoying it. And I said, what do you think? Let's talk about it. And she's not someone who normally gives a really direct opinion. And she just said, move now. It's amazing. I thought, wow. That's a pretty good recommendation. So I came here and started working in a bunch of different things, mostly in virtual reality, where it intersects with media. It's kind of the next medium and how to create empathy with audiences. And what I realized about LA is it's a city unlike any other city that I know. And most people know, because you think of a city, there's always a downtown, there's an area, a CBD, and then everything sprawls out from that. Los Angeles isn't like that. And in fact, it's actually 88 cities within LA County that we consider Los Angeles. So Santa Monica is its own city. There's many different places. Culver City is its own city. So there's all these little pockets that are in their own cities of places that we think of as the broader Los Angeles. So you just don't have that same downtown. And I think partly because of that, and partly because of those two rooted industries here, Hollywood and aerospace. Everyone, of course, knows of Hollywood, and I'll talk a little bit about aerospace later. It's just a very different culture. So people do a lot more face-to-face. Wow. People travel around a lot more. And a lot is much more about word of mouth. And there's a kind of confluence of factors, right, that bring LA together. And that's why it's quite difficult to explain. So how I normally tell people about LA and why you might not understand it or just think of it as traffic, which can be fair, is that even great restaurants you can stumble across in Dallas, in San Francisco, in New York, in London, because you're in that town center and you'll see somewhere that's really crowded. In Los Angeles, because it's a car culture, you won't. Because the entrance is actually on the parking lot, which isn't on the main road, it's on the other side. So there's all these different factors. So it's this huge consumer market. There's a very mixed demographic here. There's actually more Latinas and Latinos actually account for almost 48% of the population here. So you've got these very mixed demographics. You've got the largest port on the Western Hemisphere, the Port of LA and Long Beach. And there's a lot of materials coming in from Asia. There's a huge manufacturing hub. Of course, we're close to Silicon Valley. It's like 45 minutes on a flight. It's an 8-hour drive. So in terms of technology, and also 10 years ago, capital, 5 years ago, capital. But actually, there's a lot of capital now coming to LA. So a lot of venture capitalists are in Los Angeles. So as an entrepreneur, you're actually able to raise money here in LA. Wow. But just having that big brother in Silicon Valley is actually really useful.
Interesting. So I didn't know it was that diverse. Now, tell me about you said the diversity in different cultures. Do they mix well? Is there any like disparities with different cultures or diversities mixing? How have you experienced that?
There's definitely different pockets. There's definitely different pockets of cultures. So I, as a Brit, I came first of all to Santa Monica because Santa Monica's close to the beach. It's fairly walkable. And then I realized what a cliche was, because that's actually where all the Brits come to. It's very white middle class. That's Santa Monica. It's great. There's a lot of great things about it, but it is that. But it's interesting, as I've spoken to some of the business leaders here, it's become a really good consumer market to test things. And that's why they wanted to be here. So they can tell a lot about the areas that they're selling to and which demographics are then things are working with or not. So downtown is probably a younger, funkier crowd right now. Inglewood is actually changing massively. You've got Manhattan Beach, all the way through to Pasadena, various areas of downtown. And if you look at Watts, it's a completely different demographic. So business leaders here can tell a lot about their products and how they're selling based on the areas they're shipping to, which is just fascinating. And you don't get in such a small area pretty much anywhere else.
Wow. That's amazing. Now, how has it changed or evolved during the whole COVID? Because now I'm saying hopefully post-COVID, but how are things transforming and growing in Los Angeles now?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Obviously, I mean, I think no one really knows what's going to come out of COVID, but there's certainly some trends that we're seeing. One of the really interesting things, I think, is that a lot of trends are accelerating. So if you think about retail and commerce, already there was a lot more people are moving towards buying things online, buying groceries online, being used to just buying things and having them delivered, right? And LA had that original mix of influences of social media. If you think about Hollywood, right, that's where a lot of the entertainers were and came from. A lot of people come here to find their career. So you've actually got a lot of people who are very good at social media and have really developed that, but have also become entrepreneurs. So this has actually become the home of direct-to-consumer brands. So you may have come across people like Dollar Shave Club. It's probably one of the most famous. And they sold for $1 billion. But there's MeUndies, there's Goats, there's Honest Company, there's Bloom Nation, there's Parachute, there's Joybird, there's tons. So given that LA was already so well set up for e-commerce, that trend has actually been accelerating. And as more people are buying online, a lot of those companies are needing to staff up. Because they're selling more and more online, as demographics who didn't necessarily buy online before now are.
Yeah,
so you'll see.
Yeah, I completely get you there. And, you said something interesting about ordering online. In New York was pretty much like California, complete shutdown. That's where I was coming from. And 3 months in-house and all the groceries brought to me. And I was like, I kind of like this actually. Not having to go get my groceries, having the laundry picked up. I was like, I kind of feel like a queen here. No, but I was very interested to see how businesses reinvented and said, okay, people can't come out, let's bring it to them. So they started to re-engage their staff to be more people that could deliver. For the delivery service, they're like, we'll go get your stuff, where a lot of places weren't doing that. They made that an option. So it's nice to see that was happening. Now, also, as a lot of things were shut down in California, has it affected some businesses more than others, or what have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Some businesses have been hit really hard. And it's really tough, particularly for the smaller businesses. But what we are seeing is businesses being really adaptable. So one of the trends that I think is really interesting is the restaurant versus grocery trend. So grocery stores before, they were starting to get into the restaurant game because they were serving hot food. You can go to a grocery store, you can go to Whole Foods and you can make your own salad, or they've got a pizza bar, they've got sandwich bars, so they've got all these things. So that's really taking out of restaurants' market. But then as those grocery stores initially closed down, and a lot of restaurants suddenly, they weren't able to sell in-house, but they had all of the supply chains already set up, they had a lot of inventory already there. So what they realized was they could sell pantry boxes. And actually, they could help people who are worried about getting their essentials and say, okay, we can give you your pizza tonight. Do you also need milk or eggs or bread? Because we can deliver those things as well. And that's been really good because, okay, we've seen this change then from grocery to restaurant, and it's kind of taken some of it back. But actually, it's also really good for consumers as well, because they're able to get things that they couldn't necessarily get at grocery stores. And it's good for the suppliers, because maybe we don't think about the farms where this stuff's coming from. We don't think about these producers, because if you're selling to a restaurant, and most of them, this will be a lot of their business, if the restaurants close, their business closes. So being able to keep those supply chains open has been really good. So it's been tough. Obviously, there are a lot of small businesses that are really, really being hit hard. But I also think there's some good stories to tell coming out of this. And in times of hardship, it's where you see the most entrepreneurial spirit, and you see some of the most exciting things come out as well in terms of business, I think.
Exactly. I think we forget, all of us, whether you're a business owner or not, we lose the creativity in our life. We kind of just get on the hamster wheel, keep doing the same thing. And when something like this comes about, no matter what it is in your life, you're like, okay, now I've got to be creative and figure out a new way to do things. And I think it's actually brought that entrepreneur, or at least creativity, back to people's lives. Like, how could I do this differently? One being exercise. I used to go to the gym several times a week, and I was like, now what do I do? So I got a bunch of weight from Amazon and started doing it. I found a wonderful thing online that has hundreds of free workouts. So now I've, for the past 2 months, been working out 5 days a week. So it's really energized, I think, all of the public, business and otherwise, just to rethink, how do I live now? How can I get the best out of life right now, even amidst post-COVID?
Yeah, without doubt. And I think those businesses that can be adaptable, and that really, as you say, I have to think out the box, they have to think differently, because they may have had a plan, but that's gone out the window. Like, all of our plans have gone out the window, right? None of us expected to be in this situation where we're staying at home. Yeah. So the companies that can change and can think about what may be the new normal, and maybe the people won't want to socialize so much, they're the ones who are going to come out well. The other companies that are really interesting here, I think, is if you come across cloud kitchens or virtual kitchens.
Yes, I have heard that. Now, is that really taking hold in Los Angeles?
Well, this is the way. This is literally set up for COVID, if you think about it, because what it does. So for anyone that doesn't know, a cloud kitchen is almost a shared kitchen. So it's lots of small kitchens together as a hub that have shared central facilities, but do not have dining facilities. So they're specifically made for all of these delivery companies to use. Yeah. So if you think about it, it makes total sense, because what they're doing is they're creating all of this food for the delivery services, but they don't have that wasted inventory of restaurant space. It's really making the most of the space they've got. And they're already used to being exceptionally clean, and having to share these facilities means that actually having the hub makes it a lot more manageable in these times where there's stricter conditions. So actually, Travis Kalanick, who people know from Uber, who founded Uber, he did that in San Francisco because that's where the capital was. But his next business is literally called Cloud Kitchens, and he's moved back to LA to do that. Yeah, so that's an example again of people moving back to LA from San Francisco, and we're seeing a little bit of an exodus. We did see a lot of real estate being bought up by some of the big tech companies. I don't know how that's going to change, because a lot of them saying people that don't necessarily need to go back right now. But LA is a nice place to live. You know, we joke that it's 72 and sunny every day as a Brit coming from London where it rains, all the time.
I can deal with that weather.
The sunshine. Yeah,
exactly. What do you think, Jodie, that all the other states could pick up from what LA has learned, that they could pick up and maybe bring their own state and make, explode from there? What could they pick up from LA?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned from e-commerce. I really think that Los Angeles is the home of e-commerce and retail, because you've got this marrying of Hollywood and on the social media platforms with commerce. And because you've learned from this diversity, there's a lot of innovative solutions that have come out of here. So for me, I would really look at the e-commerce and the retailers down here and have a look at what they're doing, because there's a lot that can be taken away from them.
That's fascinating to me. For you personally, what has come out for you during this whole time? Both after writing the book and just going through post-COVID, what has your biggest lesson been, your biggest takeaway?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think it's really actually forced me to recalibrate, because at the same time as writing this book, I actually had a baby. And so literally 2 babies came about at the end of last year. And so I was just getting back to working and my business. And so I've had to recalibrate that, and obviously having him home. And I think, as you say, we have these visions, and we have these plans of the ways we're working. And then I, for a short time, was obviously forced back into a different way. People weren't traveling. My main business is bringing international folk over here on executive tours to learn about innovation, mostly in Los Angeles, but obviously we go to New York and San Francisco as well, and really dealing with C-suite. And right now, of course, there's no travel and they're not making strategic investments. So that was, a big deal to then figure out, okay, well, what's going to happen with this business? Turns out there's a lot you can do online, but also then dealing with childcare, because we've now been in this little bubble. So for me, it's actually recalibrating and also learning to appreciate, I get all this extra time now with my son. And sometimes, we're tearing our hair out, but actually it's really good. And being able to not spend a lot of time on planes and speak to people on Zoom and meet people in a different way. Yeah. You just adapt and you get to meet slightly different people. And it's really interesting. It's really great.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that, Jodie, because one of the things I got in my own life, I would run to work with my clients, run to the gym, run home, get home at 9 o'clock, make dinner, eat really late. And both in my life and people I know who have kids or otherwise say it's great. I mean, I'm not having to run 2 hours of travel a day. I'm working from home. And like you just said, with the age of Zoom and different technologies, there's so many ways to connect that if this had just happened 10 years prior, we would have been, a lot more screwed, I think. But it's been a perfect time that, that we have technology the way we do, that we can conduct business and life the way we can.
Yeah, totally. And I'm hoping that, a lot of the people that I'm speaking to believe that post-COVID, we can actually learn a lot of lessons here. There's a lot of things that can really come out of it. One of the other things I think LA is particularly good at is social good. And there's a few companies here that really focus on it. You'll hear a lot of venture capitalists talk about it. But some of the companies here, like Every Table is a really great example, where they have 2 different pricing models. So in affluent areas like Santa Monica, they charge maybe $15 for something that in poorer areas, within Los Angeles, in a sort of smallish space, they'll charge $6 or $7, because they've really helped to feed and give people really good, nutritious food at the price point they can afford. Now, with COVID, there's been much more of a spotlight, and people really appreciate businesses like that. I feel that people are much more open to building the community and understanding how they can contribute. Yeah. So long may it last, where we individually realize that we don't necessarily need to race around, but also how we can come together as a community. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's been a really positive experience. Like you say, with exercise, I've also met so many more of my neighbors because I'm walking around the block so much more, and I'm trying to discover my neighborhood because I can't go so far. Yeah. So I think there's some positive sides of COVID as well.
Yeah, there absolutely is. And I love this chat. I wish we can continue it, but I want folks to go out there and get a copy of your book and find out more about you. How can they do that?
So I've got it up here. So the book is called Los Angeles Reinvented. And the best way to get it is probably Amazon. We also have a store. You can go to lareinvented.com. But we really hope you enjoy it. The way it was built out is it's in bite-sized pieces. There's lots of different stories, and hopefully there's a lot of different takeaways no matter what industry you're in.
And you don't have to be in Los Angeles or want to go to Los Angeles to take the lessons in it to apply it to your life wherever you are, any part of the world.
Absolutely. It's showing some of the innovative things that are happening here. And the other thing that I just want to make the point of is innovation isn't always tech. In fact, I'm going to say most of the time it is not, and I think sometimes it's really small things or things that could be seen as fairly obvious that are actually really innovative and changing the way we live. So it's really down to earth, easy read, lots of stories that hopefully people can take something from.
Yeah, I love that. Just to end here, I know a friend who worked at a big gym, and as you know, a lot of the big gyms are all shut down right now. And she was just like, oh my gosh, my career's over. I've been at this club for 20 years. What am I going to do? Well, she has built over the past years, like, people now, you've met them. She called her clients up on the phone. They said, we love you. We want to work with you. She's Skyping it, baby. She's Skyping her exercise and still doing the exercise. So she's actually not having to travel, make more money, not having to give a piece to the gym. Boom.
Oh, it's so good. And I love seeing this from people, this entrepreneurship that people didn't even know that they had in them. People kind of think of it as this big, scary thing, but it's not. It's thinking, okay, well, what can I do differently? What are the things I love doing? And how can I bring that to people in a different way? And I think we're just going to see more and more examples of that in Los Angeles, and around the US and around the world.
Absolutely. Well, Jodie, I just have to thank you again for coming to Savvy Broadcasting and sharing your great wisdom today. And let everyone know again where they can find out and get your book.
It's Los Angeles Reinvented, and the best way to get it is Amazon.com or at LAReinvented.com.
Awesome, Jodie. Thank you so much for coming to Savvy Broadcasting tonight.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. It's great talking to you.
If you like this episode, please share. To hear more Savvy episodes and Savvy Biz tips, go to lifeunscriptedradio.com. To become a guest or participate in paid sponsorship, email us at Christina@lifeunscriptedradio.com.